Hello and welcome to a slightly quieter than normal version of an episode of Blurbal Reasoning, where I talk about the book, what I just read, and you listen, I guess. Shall we start with a blurb? I can't remember if this is a recurring thing I do every episode, but I feel like it should be, so here we go. The Wheel of Time, Book 4, The Shadow Rising. The wheel of time turns and ages come and go, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth returns again. In the third age, an age of prophecy, the world and time themselves hang in the balance. What was, what will be, and what is may yet fall under the shadow. The seals of Sheol Ghul are weak now, and a dark one reaches out. The shadow is rising to cover humankind. In Tar Valon, men sees portents of hideous doom. Will the White Tower itself be broken? In the Two Rivers, the White Cloaks ride in pursuit of a man with golden eyes, and in pursuit of a Dragon Reborn. In Cantarin, among the Sea Folk, High Lady Suroth plans a return of the Shan armies to the mainland. Sorry, I got tripped up there because it's spelled differently to how I imagined. In the Stone of Tyr, the Lord Dragon considers his next move. It will be something no one expects. Not the Black Archer, not Tyran Nobles, not Aes Sedai, not Egwene or Elaine or Nynaeve. Oh my god, I'm seeing so many of these things written down for the first time and they're all spelled differently to how I imagined. Against the Shadow Rising stands the Dragon Reborn. So yeah, at the end of the previous one, I said that I was considering taking a break from the series, but I didn't. It's been 3 months since the last book update, but I spent most of those 3 months reading this book. I think I did take a little bit of a break, around 20-30% of the way in, for maybe a week or two where I didn't listen to it, but besides that it's been pretty full on. The Shadow Rising is undeniably my favourite book in the series so far. It's so good. I like that we see a return to Rand's point of view, because we didn't get a lot of that in book 3 if I remember right. I still find the pacing of which character we're covering and for how long to be almost random. It might be more to do with what's happening in the world at any given time, like maybe one of them is travelling for a few weeks while the other is having major story beats happen. I didn't really pay too much attention to that kind of timescale thing on a chapter by chapter basis, but it was definitely something where I was like, man, we've been with Perrin for a long time, and then suddenly it's like, oh, now we're going to be with Nynaeve for ages, you know? It's not like Perrin, then Nynaeve, then Rand, then you know, like you would kind of expect. That being said, I'm not necessarily throwing that out. I think it does give us time to really lean into a certain corner of the story and get immersed in it and kind of just stay with them for maybe 100 pages or more. My favourite corner, if we're going to keep using that metaphor, of this particular book has to be Perrin. Oh my god, his story was so good in this book. In The Shadow Rises, Perrin Ibarra goes from a mildly interesting character with this wolf thing going on, and kind of a slow thinker, and he's got this whole thing about, is he going to choose the axe or the hammer, and he's got Fael with him as well, and it's all kind of interesting, but then he goes home to the Two Rivers and becomes a fucking general, and it's so well done. The kind of imposter syndrome of him being like, why are people reacting to what I'm saying? I'm just telling them what they should be doing and they're doing it. Why are they doing it, you know? All this stuff, and like this kind of coming of age story of him kind of becoming the leader that the Two Rivers needed and driving the Trollocs out and all this. It was so good. Not just because of him as a character, but also the storyline, the setting. We're going back to where it all began. Perrin coming home to find that his family have been murdered by what he thinks are Trollocs at any rate, but actually turns out to be the White Cloaks, is some really well written grief. It feels really realistic. The fact that he starts reacting before his brain can kind of catch up with his reactions. I definitely have experienced that kind of emotional dissonance. It's so well written. Like, I don't have any direct quotes, but it's stuff like, you know, for what Perrin realised that his hand was gripping around his axe, and you know, he didn't remember doing it and stuff like that. Just like, why was he, like, he wanted to tell Fael it was okay, but suddenly he was crying into her chest and stuff like that. Oh, it's so well done. I really felt sad for him. It's not all grief either. Perrin and Fael feels like some real genuine love. Well written love, and yeah, it's just well done all around. Like, maybe them meeting up originally felt a bit forced, and her attaching herself to him felt a little bit forced, but even though the beginning might have been a bit janky, I feel like where they've gotten to now feels really organic and how they've grown it. I didn't enjoy the argument that they had towards the beginning of the book, and then it was all the, oh, well, you're not going to go to the Two Rivers, I'm going to go to the Two Rivers, and if you're lucky, I may allow you to follow me. All that stuff felt a little bit kind of drawn out and overdone, but besides that, it was really nice to see them get married at the end of a book. And the battle for the Two Rivers, with the Trollocs surrounding them and everything, oh my god, I'm really starting to see the appeal of A Wheel of Time. Like, one of the cons is that, yeah, it's a really long series and you're going to be reading it forever, but one of the perks is that when you're 4 books deep and this town that's so core to the series is in turmoil, you start feeling it when random villagers die. You're like, oh no, you know, I've heard that name for a few chapters. Like, nobody major died in that battle, but like, I was worried for the characters, and it was really cool. Shall we move on to Tanchico, where Nynaeve and Elaine went? I didn't love Tanchico for the most part. I thought it was a lot of long, drawn-out, you know, planning, plotting in a room, focusing on the relationships between, you know, Elaine and Tom, and the sailor dude and the Shan lady, and it just went on for a little bit too long without anything really happening, and like all of this stuff about the politics of this random city we've only just heard about. It was honestly the kind of chapter that would make me maybe not dive into the next one the next night, but go and watch something before going to sleep or something, or like listen to a podcast on the way home instead, like just make my attention wander from the book. That being said, while it was a really slow burn, the climax of that particular arc was really cool and interesting. Nynaeve taking on the Forsaken, it was so cool. I was impressed when Elaine took out the Black Archer lady without needing any assistance or anything like that. But then we go straight to Nynaeve and she's just fucking dueling like one of the Forsaken. Holy shit. It's at this point that I really start to question why Nynaeve and Elaine and Egwene aren't considered ta'veren alongside Rand and Perrin and Matt, because like they, oh my god, I forgot to talk about Matt. We'll get to him. A lot is made about the 3 boys and how they have like an effect on the world of shaping other people's destinies around them, but not enough is really made about Nynaeve and Egwene and Elaine basically doing the same thing. Like, what they're doing is equally as important to, I think they call it the world lace, right? Like, it doesn't feel like they're doing things because of, I mean, I guess they're doing things because of other people. I don't know, maybe I need to learn more about ta'veren to really understand why they're not, but it kind of feels like they should be. I will say as well, today, as of the day of recording, a brand new trailer came out for the Wheel of Time Amazon Prime show, and in it, I forget, I only watched for it once, but I saw in the comments, the sentence, the 5 of you, is said in relation to who the Trollocs are after, when it should be the 3 of you, because they're after 3 potential farm boys who end up being ta'veren, and people are like, oh my god, are they changing it? Oh, but the prophecy says that it can only be a dude or whatever, and yeah, we don't know what they're doing with it yet. But my takeaway from that is, I think it's more to do with ta'veren, and I think they might be changing Egwene and Nynaeve to also be ta'veren, and I think if they do, that would be a good thing. It's one of those things where it's like, I was kind of thinking along those lines anyway, and now it seems like they're probably doing that. But again, I'm 4 books in, so I can't really make a final decision on that one. We only got like 2 min chapters, but they were like, well, one of them wasn't such a major chapter, but the second one was a massive chapter of the White Tower breaking, of Siuan Sanche being betrayed and being thrown out of a tower and being stilled, and I'm actually super excited to see where that plotline goes, because Siuan Sanche being like a stilled Aes Sedai who is still driven, and she's gonna get Logain, who's obviously this, what do they call it? Stilling, but for dudes, you know, neutering. And he's also now, apparently, according to Min's visions, going to be an important character. I'm really excited to see that unfold. I really like that band of people, of Min who can, you know, catch glimpses of the future, of the 2 stilled Aes Sedai who used to be in a place of power but now aren't, and Logain, the previous false dragon, who's now going to have something to do with the story. I really want to see where that goes. Also, I always get confused between Gawain and Galad, but one of them turned out to be a real bastard, huh? Because we didn't spend a lot of time at the White Tower in this book, it really felt out out of nowhere when all that conflict exploded, and you hear crazy things about how these warder apprentices murdered the warders, or I guess fought them in battle and won, and like how an entire Aja, I think, was it the blue or the red, I get them mixed up, I'm sorry, but one of them has kind of fled the tower or been killed, and it was just so like, oh shit, this is major. One thing I will say though is I'm really confused about the fact that Min saw this coming, told Swan about it, and then Swan was just kind of like, oh yeah, no, don't worry about it. She never brings it up from her perspective at all about how she's worrying about it, and then it happens, and it's never mentioned that it was already predicted by Min. It's so strange. One errant thought I did have is when Elida, I think is the one who betrays her, right? She says, we're not going to let you destroy the tower, and that's meant to be taken at face value of, oh, you know, she's probably Black Aja, and she's just saying this to gain control and all of this. But my thing is, like, we've had characters withhold information from us, the reader, from their perspective before, right? What if Swan did kind of plan to break the tower as part of her plans for a greater good or something, and that's why she didn't react to Min's visions, but I guess nothing came of that, but that was just a little pet theory I had in my head at the time. Like, not necessarily that she's evil, but just wouldn't it be interesting if the Amelan seat was the one to break the tower? But again, yeah, never mind. Oh hey, before I forget it, because I know I will, jumping back to the Tanchico plotline for a moment, one line that really stood out to me when Nynaeve was dueling that Forsaken lady whose name I've forgotten, is that when she's trying to distract her by telling her stuff about the Age of Legends, she mentions offhandedly that back in her time, mankind had such technology that they could go to the stars and visit other planets. And holy shit, sci-fi in the Wheel of Time universe, sign me the fuck up. I love this kind of shit so much. Like, I haven't gotten to it yet, but we also see from Rand's perspective, he goes back to the Age of Legends to, I guess it would be the Second Age, and you see that they have these things called Storm Lances, I think, which are essentially ranged electric weapons of some sort, and then there's some allusion made to the fact that they have like helicopters and stuff, and I really love the fluctuating levels of technology. It's not just a flat out fantasy world, it's a world where at some point they had space travel, and I'm not necessarily saying that they had space travel as in we went forth and colonized other space systems. I think it's only really meant to be up to the point where we are at currently as a human race, where we stood on the moon once or twice, but you know, it's still really fucking cool. I've heard a few times about how people really like this series up until like book 7, and then I'm guessing something changes, and I'm wondering if it's a time skip, and I'm wondering if we get into the 4th age, and I'm wondering if technology evolves at that point. And I'm just saying right now, even though it would mean saying goodbye to our current cast of characters and a lot of plot lines that have been built up, I would be down for it. I mean, it's like a 14-15 book series, right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, you could get the Mistborn trilogy, and then the second trilogy he did, and then I think there's some more books after that as well, and instead of separating them off as separate trilogies, you could just call it one big series, and it would be the same kind of thing, right? But I'm theorizing. That's another thing that caught my ear as well. I'm sure this has been going on for many books, and I just haven't noticed, but at the end, it's framed by a historian of the 4th age telling us about what Rand did in the 3rd age, so it definitely tells us that no matter what happens in these books, there is a future. It's not the end of the world. And sure, you could say obviously it's probably not going to be the end of the world, Christian, but it's just interesting that it eliminates that perspective and that there's more story in a future age. Not necessarily that we're going to get to it, but just that in that universe there's more life that occurs in a different quote-unquote age from this one. Although, again, a lot of hubbub has been made about the fact that the ages kind of circle and cycle, and it kind of goes 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe there's 5, 6, 7, who knows, and then back to 1, 2, 3, 4, or however. I still don't really know how it all works, obviously, because I'm on book 4. Can you tell that I'm really getting into this? As for Rand's perspective and his journey into the Threefold Land, or the Waste, or whatever you want to call it, yeah, that was a really cool one too. One thing I admire about what the books have done so far is it's paired off different characters to go to different story arcs. So this time, instead of getting Rand and Perrin hanging out, now we've got Rand and Matt. We get a nice little taster at the start of the book of Rand being a ruler and kind of ruling Tyr, and the one thing I'll say about that is it's definitely more interesting than the Song of Ice and Fire equivalent of Daenerys ruling in a city where you're not necessarily sure she's going to be staying. I don't know, just felt like a comparison I wanted to make. Because we haven't seen much of his perspective in like a whole book, it's kind of reasonable that we would see him make this kind of jump from kind of budding leader with imposter syndrome that we kind of see Perrin get in this book to someone who's a bit more used to being a leader, even though he's still wishing to just be a farm boy at heart. I feel like in this book we really do see him grow into the role of the Dragon Reborn. Like, he has plots and schemes now that he's hiding from Moiraine, he's got people he's commanding, he's kind of leading the flow of what's going on, not because he ran away and everyone's having to chase him, but because he's directing people to locations and they're following him. The entire sequence with Matt going through the door near the beginning of the book, I forget if it's a Terangrial or Angrial or Serangrial, I always get mixed up with what those ones mean. And if you're wondering why I keep saying I get mixed up about these things, it's because I'm listening to it as an audiobook, so I'm not like stopping and rescanning a paragraph several times until I bake it into my mind what it means. It's kind of a benefit in a weird way, because it means I'm getting on with the story instead of trying to analyse everything. But it's interesting that Matt goes and asks his 3 questions, and we hear his 3 answers, which don't really happen, or some of them don't really happen in this book. I think he gets told to go to Rudion, but we don't know why he would die if he didn't. Maybe we're going to find out the Stone of Tyr got overrun at some point while they were all away and everyone died, I don't know. But what's really interesting to me is that Rand and Moiraine also go, and they also get 3 questions answered, and we don't know what those questions are. Even when we go back to Rand's perspective, he never tells us. Having just finished the book, I'm kind of assuming one of his questions was, how do I channel without going mad? And the answer was, seek advice from one of the Forsaken. Even though I know that Lanfear tells him that much, I feel like he got confirmation through that question. But yeah, I'm still dying with curiosity, wanting to know what Rand and Moiraine's questions were. Now, I think the biggest lore bomb of this book, and I think every book has had a big lore bomb so far, the big one in this one was Rudion, or Roidion, or however you say it, and what Rand saw there, and how he was going backwards in time through each one of his ancestors and learning about the truths of the Aiel and where they came from, and how they used to be the Tuatha, and why they are the way that they are, and most interestingly for me, as I've already mentioned, what it was like before the breaking, because that's how far back it goes. I'm honestly tempted to go back and re-listen to those chapters, because the first few visions were kind of hard to grasp what was going on, and it became more apparent as the visions went on, but especially the later visions, which subsequently ended up being the earliest, trying to understand what technology is on display from the perspective of a farm boy who doesn't know what technology is quite difficult. And it sounds like in the final vision they're all gathering before some sort of Millennium Dome thing as it counts down to reveal a big unveiling of a finding of how men and women can all use the same side of a power, and apparently that went wrong, and that's what tainted the male half of the power, and I'm just burning with curiosity to learn more about that. But also I want to talk about the vision before that, which takes place just after the breaking, and how, well, it's kind of happening during the breaking, and how the male Aes Sedai have gone mad, and how they're kind of like marching on this city, and how they're talking about their plans in the city to try and save as many people as they can, and how they're going to flee. And it's just so sad. It's just so sad. Like, I'm not a big fan of post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic stories because of just how bleak they are, but this was like the perfect way of doing it, because it's not the entire book, it's just like an injection of bleakness, and it was so well written, of just like the perspective of Luz Ferrin's son, I believe it was, who went up and he saw are one of those creatures who I think is the same kind of creature that guarded the Eye of the World, if my memory serves correctly, and it was like the last of its kind, and it was kind of losing its mind a bit, and the girl was like, oh yeah, do you remember me? You used to kind of dangle me on your knee when I was young, and he was just like, no, I've forgotten a great many things, I'm sorry, and it's just so sad. I think there's something so special about a world that you can spend 3.5 books in, and then have that level of lore told to you, because you're already so invested in the world as it is, that when you get to see how it was, and how different it used to be, and how tragic it is that it's not like that anymore, it really is like quite a unique experience. I'm starting to understand why people rave about this series so much. If it's any indication, I rated the first 3 books 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. This one I rated 5 out of 5 stars. And I'm told it just gets crazier from here, so... Let's not forget Matt, who went for another door, assuming it was another thing where he could ask questions and get answers. It seems more like he would make demands, and he would get the things, but he would have to dictate a price, and because he didn't, they tried to kill him, but now he's got this weird black spear thing, and, more interestingly, his holes in his memory have been filled with quote-unquote memories that seem to be somebody else's. Okay, that wasn't a quote-unquote, that was a paraphrase, but you get what I mean. Many allusions have been made to the fact that these characters have been born again from previous ages, from, like, obviously Rand as Luz Ferrin, but, like, also Matt and Perrin and assumedly others. So that's really cool. I think it's fairly obvious that the memories that Matt are experiencing are memories of his previous life, which is super cool. Another thing I didn't mention about Elaine and Nynaeve's kind of section of a book is that we learned through the dream that some certain characters, such as these characters that we're probably living with now, when they die, they go back to the dream, and then they are reborn in a later age to live again, which does kind of lend an essence of what is this all for if the same battle is being fought multiple times across different spans of generations. I'm still kind of having trouble figuring out if the fight that these characters are currently going through is normal, like, is the kind of fight you would expect them to be having for their generation, or if it's more of a kind of entire wheel of time defining fight where it could break the entire wheel of generations and rebirth. But yeah, we got a nice little lore bomb from Brigitte in Teleron Riod about how that works, and I'm curious as to why she wouldn't have been reborn if so many other people have. Like, why is she being held back? What decides that? Is this the kind of thing that we get a solid answer to, or is this all just theories in the end that people have been talking about on Reddit for 15 years? Who knows? Well, if you're watching this, you might know. I assume you're probably well familiar with the series if you're watching my thoughts on book 4. But yeah, after Rodion, or whatever, Rand and Matt go for a nice big trek across the desert, and not a lot happens except we learn that Rand is quite attracted to Avienda because of course he needs another woman to be attracted to, because of course he's the protagonist and that's just how these things work. If you can't tell, I still haven't changed my stance on this being a little bit too, oh, and he gets all the women because he's the main character and that's what you want to do when you're a big shot. I don't know, it just kind of comes across weird. Like, I get that these might be characters that have all kind of like been close to him in previous lives and stuff, but the fact of the matter still remains that this was written, not with any ill intention surely, but like this was written to be this way. It's not just like a fact of life, like intention went into this writing, it always does. In all honesty, I'm probably just noticing it because I'm looking out for it, because I know how white male protagonist characters can be in fantasy, but I don't think any ill intention went into this. It's just something I can't help but notice. There's probably a lot more that I'm forgetting to talk about. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything major that you want my take on. But the real takeaway I want to give you from this book is that I'm not taking a break between this book and the next. It's got its hooks in me. I am 100% invested, and I am really starting to see why people love this series so much. It's so well written, it's so interesting, and it's got so many just like interesting corners of lore that I'm like, tell me more about that. And that's the kind of fantasy I love the most. unexplained mysteries, unexplored bits of lore, and, not knowing how magic worked or what certain parts of history kind of need to be explored, or the idea that they could have been more technologically advanced in a previous time, or that we don't know where the Shonchen really come from. Like, all of these things are just nectar to me. Thank you for listening. Sorry it was a bit more of a hushed tone. It is quite late, people are sleeping, but I wanted to make sure I got my thoughts down on this before I started the next book, and it affected my perception of this one, because I get anal about that kind of thing, I guess. I will see you in the next one, which will probably be 3 months from now, because apparently that's how long it takes for me to read a book of A Wheel of Time.